Mr. Curley.
Thank you. So I'm Jim Crilly. I'm a vet. I worked for Teagasc. I was part of the Teagasc investigation in 2004. I found the cadmium in the eaves. Then I went away, I retired. I went off for a while. And I was back in Kilkenny in 2007 speaking at the local veterinary meeting down there. And after the meeting, I was just talking to some of the lads. And they said about the Brennan case. And I said, I found cadmium there 3 or 4 years ago. And they said, oh, did you? Yeah. So I then drove into Dan's yard one day. I hadn't seen him for 4 years and said, what's the story here? And got involved with it again, representing Dan. And I would like to explain to you what happened. So we'll start with the break-in, and then we'll go to the cover-up, so to speak, if you know what I mean. The factory, the brick factory. The brick factory was a problem. That's not in dispute. Anybody wants to dispute that with me, I will. This is. We've been trying to get this this discussion going, that nobody will actually dispute with us that it wasn't the factory. We got as far as Brussels in 2012 and we were closed down. They said that there would be an independent scientific evaluation of the data. You can see the video on YouTube. At the end of the meeting, it was proposed by the Deputy Chief Veterinary Inspector that because of the dispute about the facts of the case, that the best thing would be an independent scientific evaluation. Proposed by the Department of Agriculture, the Joint Research Committee, they said. Seconded by Mairead McGuinness, who was sitting in the meeting and had previously been on the Petitions Committee in Brussels. And the meeting closed with the Italian lady chairman saying we will put this petition in abeyance pending an independent scientific review of the data. Because at the last meeting, at the previous 3 meetings, the Irish authorities didn't show up. In 2012, they did show up and they made some kind of a case that it wasn't the factory. And that was in 2012. We lobbied Petty to get, when are they going to set this investigation up? When can we talk to the people who are going to do it? And without discussion, consent or notice to Dan, his file was transferred from the Petitions Committee in Brussels to the boys next door here, the Petitions Committee in the Oireachtas. And that transfer appeared to occur without any documentation on the movement of the files or the decisions that were made, because we made inquiries through MEPs in Brussels, and the Secretariat of the Petitions Committee in Brussels were unable to identify any records as to who had sanctioned the transfer of the case to Dublin, on what terms it had been transferred to Dublin. Dan was never informed of it. We only found out about it a year later. Then Dublin had the case. I documented to you. I've got copies of this, so you can work your way through it. Dublin said, we'll start again. It was 8 years in Brussels. It wasn't transferred with any covering note saying, we have found in favour of the petitioner and we're referring this case back to the national authorities in order that they may address the issues raised. Instead, the Petitions Committee, the Oireachtas Petitions Committee, said, dear Mr. Brennan, if you want to open a case with us, write it all down and fire it in. Which we did. And we got a reply saying that on legal advice, it was their opinion that the case would not be eligible to be considered by the Oireachtas Petitions Committee. We got a letter from them. And before they could actually decide that it wasn't eligible, the Dáil ended, and when the Dáil session ends, all the petitions for that Dáil fall. And it is at the discretion of the Petitions Committee to reinstate in the next Dáil if they so wish. And we wrote to them and inquired, did they so wish? And they said they didn't so wish. And then the case was still open in Brussels at this stage, because all Brussels had said, which is their normal operating procedure, is we refer back to the national authorities to deal with, on the basis of our findings, that there is, I mean, I think they actually said that the petitioner is owed an apology. He's owed a bit more than an apology, but that's what they said. The Irish authorities should apologise to him. And then in December, what year, Dan? 14?
Yes.
You'll know it because it was the month Phil Hogan took over as Commissioner.
14.
And the month Phil Hogan took over as Commissioner, December 14, Dan's case was closed by the Petty Secretariat, not the members, not in session. The Petty Secretariat closed Dan's case in Brussels. And again, this was done without discussion, without consent, or without notification. And again, the Petitions Committee in Brussels are unable to produce any documentation relating to who closed the case or why they closed the case in Brussels. But closing the case in Brussels meant Dan had no way back. If the Oireachtas Petitions Committee decided that the case was A, ineligible, or B, had lapsed and wasn't going to be reinstated, he couldn't now go back to Brussels. And now we're here. That's what's happened. That's A, B, C, and D. That's where we got to. All that's documented. In fact, you actually have you have more of the documents than I do, because the file was handed over to a member of the. There was a visitation by the Oireachtas Petitions Committee over to Brussels at the time they were setting themselves up, and a lady that was on that team said that as they were leaving Brussels, somebody came up to her, handed her the file, Dan's file, and said, take that with you. No cover note, no terms, no nothing. The file was so big, she said, that on the flight home she had to book it in. It was too big to be carried on. Now, there's been some issues, I think, lately with the planning people. And some of the issues raised in Board Planola, I happened to reading the papers there about them the other day, just struck me as misgovernance issues, including lapses in adherence to operating procedures and in the recording of file movements and decisions. Now, I think we have two very well documented cases where there appear, because we don't want to be disparaging anybody here, there appear to be misgovernance issues, including lapses of adherence to operating procedures in the recording of file movements and decisions, both by the people who handed over the files and the people who received the files, because I'm sure receiving a government file without the proper documentation and authority and procedures is frowned upon. So anyway, that's the cover-up. So we'll get down to the break-in now. The break-in is the factory. We'll go back to the factory. Is that okay? You still with me?
Okay.
Go on, walk away for the time being, Jim. We can have a few minutes.
Oh, okay. Now, so the factory. The factory's been there since God was a boy, the 60s or something, and producing bricks because they closed the coal mine and they wanted work for the people to do. And in the APC licensing system came in 2001. Prior to that, there was no emissions limitations or controls at all in the ceramic brick sector. And part of the whole rationalisation of all this stuff was that they would get an APC licence. And the licence was issued in January 01. And at the time of the determination of the licence, Ormond Brick had two kilns, kiln 1, kiln 2. And they vented through a common stack 24.4 metres high, and I think I actually give you a picture of the stack seen from Dan's yard, which is 12 metres above the top of the stack. The stack's at the bottom of the valley, steep side, Dan's farmyard and his land, going up to the side of it. So that's the setup. And they issue them a licence for an EVL, an emissions limit value for fluoride of 1 kilogram an hour up to the 1st of January 2006 and 5 milligrams per cubic metre to apply thereafter. This is why I left this bit to the end, because it's all a bit technical. But they were allowed to pump out a kilogram of fluoride an hour. Now, that thing operated from January 01 to December 06. It operated 24 hours, because that was the time of the excitement, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 2 weeks off for the summer holidays, 10 to 12 days, Christmas and New Year for relining the kilns or whatever they do. It operated for 93% of the time for 6 years. 24 hours a day. At a permitted level of 1 kilogram, get your head around it, 1 kilogram of fluorine an hour for 6 years. That's a lot of fluorine. Anyway, now, why did they get a license? Okay, we'll go to the Batnik. The Batnik is the best available technology without entailing excessive costs, which is the basis for the APC licence. The Batnik is 5 milligrams if you're abating and 10 milligrams if you're not abating.
So I'm going to stop you now, Jim. We're going to have to go for a vote.
Aye, well, that's grand.
So I'll suspend and I'll let you, when we'll be back in hopefully about 10 minutes, and we'll let you...
10 minutes?
Yeah, we'll be back in about 10 minutes, I'd say.
Okie doke.
Okay, sorry about that now.